Welcome to your final video. This is a big culmination of everything where we're going to practice some of your new skills and learn to use your sewing machine by making these cute little pattern weights. With this project, you're going to learn to sew fabric right side together. You're going to learn how to trim your corners, how to flip it inside out, how to ladder stitch, which is a hand stitch technique to close a seam. So we're going to just make these super cute pattern weights, and these are very easy. They're a really good beginner project. This will get you used to using your machine a little bit more. So these are great because you can set them on top of your fabric when you've got a pattern you're cutting out. When you have a paper pattern, this can hold the pattern on the fabric and keep it from wiggling around as you get further along in your sewing and you start using paper patterns. So we're going to make one of these, and let's show you the supplies that you need first, and then we'll head over to the sewing machine after we cut things out. Let's get started. Okay, so to do this project, you're going to need a little bit of scrap fabric. You can see you don't need very much. This would even make a couple of them. So you just need a little bit of fabric that's at least like 4 inches wide. You'll need some kind of cutting tool for your fabric, either your fabric scissors or your rotary cutter and ruler. You will want some kind of ruler or straight edge to measure. If you don't have a cutting mat like I do, you definitely need a ruler so that you can measure your fabric and cut it to the correct size. It's easier, like I have this cutting mat, so I can actually just hold the fabric up to the edge and I can see how many inches it is. So these are really handy even if you just get a small one, but if you don't have one, a regular ruler will work. You'll also need some kind of marking tool that will be erasable or hidden, because when we complete our project, we're going to have to draw a square on the top of here for us to sew on top of. And so you want a marking tool that is going to get erased or hidden. You don't want to use just a regular pen. So you can use something like your chalk marker, or this is one of those friction pens that's erasable with heat. So you can use something like that. To finish up our project, we're going to need a hand stitching needle, just a regular needle, and a little bit of thread. That's how we will close our thing. And then you need something to fill it with. So because these are pattern weights, you need something to add some weight to it. Now, I'm just using rice. This will work, but it's not going to create the heaviest pattern. It'll still be, pattern weight, it'll still be pretty light. So if this is all you have on hand, you can use rice as well, but you can also use things like dried beans or crushed walnut shells, or the best thing, if you can get your hands on some little metal BBs, little round BBs, those are actually heavier and they will create heavier weights, but they're still small. So if you or your husband or something have little BBs, that actually would weigh these down really well. But if not, you can use simple rice or dried beans, something like that, just to give this a little bit of weight to it. And then I just made a quick little funnel out of paper. This way I can easily funnel my beans or whatever into my pattern weight. So you might want to just grab some paper and make a little funnel too to make it easier. So not too many supplies, just a couple of things, and let's get started. I'm going to first show you how to measure and cut out your fabric, okay? Let's get started. All right, so there's a couple different ways that you can cut out your fabric, and I'm going to show you both ways. The first way I'm going to show you is the easy way, where if you have a cutting mat and a ruler and a rotary cutter, this will be the simplest way. Okay, now we're going to need, for each one, we need 2 3.5 by 3.5 inch squares. So I'm going to cut one the easy way and one the other way and show you how. So we need one 3.5 by 3.5 inch square. So on my grid, I'm going to put this raggedy edge just slightly off of this line here, because I'm going to trim it and make sure that there's no thread coming off, okay? Then I'm going to take the edge of my ruler and I'm going to line it up against this line here. And you will see there's a little bit of fabric hanging over the edge. The reason I'm doing this is just to straighten up and clean up that edge. Now I'm going to take my rotary cutter and I'm going to expose the blade, and I'm going to put that right up next to my ruler. Now I have this handy dandy handle. If you don't, just put your hand way on the other side of the ruler so that you don't accidentally cut your hand. But I'm going to hold on with my handle and I'm just going to push until it trims away. Now my rotary cutter is very dull, but I'm going to push until it trims away. And there you have. Now I have my first side is now straight and up against this line. Now I need a 3.5 by 3.5 inch square, so I'm going to count over. Each square is 1 inch, so this is 1, 2, 3 inches, and right here is a 1/2 inch mark. So I'm going to align my ruler on the 1/2 inch mark, and again I'm going to put this right up against the side of the ruler and cut straight down. Okay? Now I have a piece of fabric that's 3.5 by 3.5 inches wide. I need this to be a 3.5 by 3.5 inch square, so I am actually going to turn it just because it's easier for me, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just overlap this edge a little bit so I can trim it off. I'm going to align my ruler to that edge, to that line I mean. I'm going to do a quick snip, okay? Now, if you don't have a dull rotary cutter like I do, that'll work a little bit easier, but okay, so there you have it. Now I have, this is lined up with the edge, and because I need 3.5 by 3.5 inch square, I'm going to go again 1, 2, 3.5, and I'm going to line my ruler up at the 1/2 inch mark, and I'm going to cut again. Okay. Oh, I really need to get a better rotary cutter blade, guys. I'm so sorry. Rotary cutter blades and scissor blades do go dull, as you can see, so I will replace this for the next video. But here you can see I now have a 3.5 by 3.5 inch square. 1, 2, 3.5, and this way 1, 2, 3.5. Okay, that was the wrong side of the fabric I was cutting on. This is the right side where it's nice and pretty. Okay, so that's the easiest way to cut. But if you do not have a cutting mat or a rotary cutter, we can also just use a regular ruler and cut our fabric. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw a 3.5 by 3.5 inch square on here. Okay, I'm going to use this erasable pen so that there won't be any lines, but it won't matter anyways because I am doing this on the bad side of the fabric, on the wrong side. Okay, the right side where the print is showing really nicely, that side is down, and I want to do this on the back side so I'm not seeing as much. Okay, now I'm going to take my ruler. This is quite a big ruler for this, but you want to have a scrap that's big enough, and like I said, we need a 3.5 by 3.5. So these clear rulers make it really nice because you can see through them. So I have a corner here, and I'm gonna just draw along this first edge, and because I have a ruler that says that's wide, it's not just like a skinny school ruler, this ruler is actually wide enough to get me to 3.5 inches. So I'm going to draw my first line. Each box is 1 inch, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and here's my 1/2 inch line, and just down to the 1/2 inch line. Okay, so I have a 3.5 by 3.5 inch side. Okay, now because I have this nice quilting ruler, which I suggest you get, I also have numbers going this way. So I can actually just use the same corner, and I'm going to go 3.5 this way. So 1, 1, 2, 3.5, and I'm going to stop here. Okay, now you can take the edge of your ruler and you can line it up, and now you know to go down 3.5. 1, 2, 3.5, and then you can just line up that edge and close it up. Now this is super easy because it's just a box. You could also just draw the box, a 3.5 by 3.5 inch square, on a piece of paper first, if you're more comfortable with that, and cut that piece of paper out and then trace the square on the fabric. If you're really nervous about messing something up, you can always do that. Draw a 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch square and then draw it on the fabric. You can do that, or you can just use your ruler. Now, if you don't have a big ruler like I do and you only have just a small ruler, just do it like you would, you know, draw a straight line. That's 3.5 inches. Come over this side, measure down 3.5. You just need a 3.5 by 3.5 inch square. Now, if you don't have a rotary cutter, then you're just going to use your scissors and cut off. Now, one of the things that I should have mentioned is you want to follow the grain of the fabric. You can kind of see how there are lines crisscrossing. So when you cut your fabric or you draw your square, you want to draw it following the grain of the fabric. You don't want to draw it on a diagonal. Okay, so you wouldn't want, the grain of my fabric is going this direction and this direction. You wouldn't want to just come on here and have a crisscross line across the grain of your fabric. If you do a square like that, your fabric can stretch and pull and go different directions, and it'll mess up the shape of your fabric and the shape of your finished product because it can stretch. Now, for this specific project, that's not a huge deal. This is a little thing, but you do want to keep in mind and start training yourself now to follow the grain. So following the edge or the selvage edge of the fabric. Let me show you what I mean by selvage edge real fast. Okay, so this was just a scrap, so it didn't have really a selvage edge, but you can see on this fabric, when a fabric comes off of the bolt at the store, it's got an edge that's usually like a different color, or it's not dyed, or it's multiple colors, and it's kind of rough. It's a finished edge, but it's not an edge you want to use. But when you're making your pattern, your square, you want to make sure that you're following that line, because the direction of the selvage edge is parallel to the grain of the fabric. So the selvage edge is parallel to the grain of the fabric. So when you're cutting a pattern, you want to go with the grain of the fabric. Okay, so you can see my square goes with the grain of the fabric. What you do not want to do is this. You don't want to just willy-nilly cut a square out of any direction of the fabric. You want to make sure that you're going either with a square with this type of project, either with the grain or perpendicular to the grain, okay? But almost all projects, it's best to just learn to just go with the grain of the fabric, okay? I hope that makes sense. Basically, you don't want to just willy-nilly cut a shape anyway, any direction on the fabric. Stick with the grain so you don't have any warping of your final pattern. Okay, so let's finish cutting out this square. I've got one side. I'm just cutting on the lines that I had already traced. You can pick it up, you can cut. It's sometimes easier to hold it to cut down on the cutting mat or the table. That's why I like these scissors that have the bend, because it goes flat along the bottom and gets under the fabric. Okay, so now I can get rid of my scraps, and now I have my two 3.5 by 3.5 inch squares. Now we're going to take these and we are going to put them right sides together. Now right side together is the nice side of the fabric. The bad side is the wrong side. We want right sides together. So here's a right side is facing up, and I'm going to put this right side together with it. Now the wrong side is facing up, but my right sides are together. And we want to line them up so the edges are even. And we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we are going to stitch with a regular universal needle, and we're going to stitch at about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So that means we're going to stitch a line along each side, a 1/4 inch from each edge all the way around, and we're going to leave just a small opening, maybe like 1.5 inches, so that we can fill it. So we're going to start on one side, and we're going to sew around a 1/4 inch away from the edge, all the way to the other side, leaving about 1.5 inches opening. Okay, I'm going to take you to the sewing machine and show you how that looks. Okay, so each project is going to require you to sew a certain seam allowance. That is the distance from the edge of the fabric to wherever you stitch. That's the seam allowance. For this particular project, the seam allowance is 1/4 inch. So you need to sew 1/4 inch away from the edge. Now, one way to do this is to line it up to your presser foot edge or the seam guide on your machine. But if you're uncertain about this and you use your very first project, one of the not really a cheater ways you can do this is you can actually just draw a line 1/4 inch away from the edge of your fabric and sew right on that line. So here's my 1/4 inch mark, and I've lined it up to the edge of my fabric, and I'm just going to draw a line on my fabric here, and I'm going to extend that line all the way along. Now I'm doing this on the wrong side of my fabric. Never on the right side, just on the wrong side, okay? And I'm gonna go to the other side and I'm gonna draw another 1/4 inch. Draw that line. Now I have something to follow. Okay, I'm gonna do 2 of them with the line and 2 without. Okay, let's go over to the machine. Okay, so you wanna make sure that your sewing machine is set for a straight stitch between 2 and 3 millimeters. Mine is at 2.5. You want to use a universal needle. This is a 90-14. You want either a size 90-14 or an 80-12 if you're just using regular quilting cotton. If you're using like a home decor fabric or like a canvas, a thicker fabric, use a 90-14 needle. Those are just slightly bigger. And then you want your universal or straight stitch presser foot on, okay, and a matching thread. Now, when we start stitching, we're going to stitch on a side. Whenever you are going to flip something inside out, like we're going to here, you don't want to start on a corner because you can't close a corner very easily. So you always start on a side. Now, when you start stitching, you always back stitch. So you're going to stitch a couple stitches and you're going to go backwards a couple and then go forwards again and keep going. We're going to start on the side. So all along the edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance, all the way back, leaving a 1 inch gap on this side, okay? Now, if you have the lines drawn here, it's really easy to line up your needle to the line. If you don't, on my machine, and each machine is different, but my machine, and in general, I think, this presser foot, the edge of it is about 1/4 inch from my needle. So I know that if I line up the edge of my fabric to the edge of my presser foot, that's about 1/4 inch, which is the amount of seam allowance I need. You might also have it written on your needle plate somewhere on a seam guide. One of the numbers engraved there could say 1/4 inch, so you'd line the edge of your fabric up. Or if you drew the line, you can just trace on it. Okay, now you want to start about 2/3 of the way, or no, not 2/3. About half, a little less than halfway in the middle because we want to leave a gap here of the side. And you're going to turn your hand wheel towards you until you lower your needle into your fabric. My needle is directly on the line, so I know it's 1/4 inch away. And then I'm lowering it down into the fabric, and then I'm going to lower my presser foot. Now I am ready to sew, and I'm just going to stitch straight on this line here. Now, when I'm starting, I'm going to stitch a couple times, 3 stitches, and then I'm going to back stitch. You have a back stitch button or lever somewhere. I have a button I'm going to press, and that takes me back 3 times. That holds the thread in place instead of letting it unravel down the road. So you want to back stitch whenever you start or stop. Okay, so I back stitch. Now I can go ahead, following my line. I'm keeping it lined up along the edge. I'm sewed 1/4 inch. Now I'm 1/4 inch away now from the next edge. So I'm going to stop with my needle in the down position. My machine, I can actually set it for the needle to actually go in the down position whenever I stop stitching. So that is what I do. Not all machines have that function. So if yours doesn't, just turn your hand wheel toward you until your needle is in the down position. Lift your presser foot and pivot your fabric till it's going the next direction. Then you start stitching that side. So that's how you turn it a corner. Okay. Staying 1/4 inch on the side. Again, I'm 1/4 inch away from the next side, so I'm stopping, needle down, lift your presser foot, pivot your fabric, lower your presser foot. Now you may begin stitching again. Following this, I don't have a line here that I'm following this time. I'm just lining my fabric up to the edge of my presser foot. Okay, now I'm back to a line, so I'm stopping 1/4 inch from the edge, needle down, lift my presser foot, pivot, lower my presser foot, and keep sewing. To my last edge, again, needle down, lift your presser foot, pivot, lower your presser foot. Now I'm back to my final edge. This is where I started stitching. You do not want to close this gap up. You want to leave it open, but you don't want to be right at the edge. So you want to come in from the corner, you want to come in from the corner of a little bit and leave about 1 inch opening, okay? So I'm going to stitch about 1 inch opening. Then I'm going to press my reverse button or back stitch button, because again, you need a back stitch when you start or stop, and I'm stopping, so I'm going to back stitch a couple, and then go forward a couple just to lock it. Now I'm done. Now if you have an automatic cut button, you can press that and cut your thread. If you don't, you want to you want to turn your hand wheel towards you until your needle is all the way out of the fabric in the highest position it will go. Then you're going to raise your presser foot, and you are going to pull your fabric carefully, pulling that thread, and off to the side of your machine or the back, you will have a thread trimmer where you can wrap your thread around and it will trim it for you. Or you can just get a pair of snips or scissors and trim that off, okay? Let's see here. So now you can see I have sewn all the way around the edge, leaving a gap on one side, okay? The next step is to trim your corners, okay? Now to trim your corners, you want a sharp pair of scissors. I have little snips, but you can use any. And you want to trim, just like it says, your corners, but do not cut into your stitch line. Okay, so you want to get close to your stitch line, but don't cut it. You can trim the corner angle, and you can even trim an extra little bit on each side. This will allow, when you flip it inside out, the points to be, or the corners to get more pointed instead of being stuck with so much extra fabric on those corners. Okay, so trim the corners down. You can even sometimes do a little like rounded corner like that just to get some of that excess off. Being careful not to touch, not to clip into the edge of your stitching. Okay, now you have your corners trimmed, and now you're going to go and use your fingers in the hole. Okay, and you are going to flip this right side out. Now I left my hole a little bit small on accident. If you did the same or you messed up, let me actually show you how to use a seam ripper. So I can fix this if I wanted a bigger opening. Right over here, I can take this pointed edge, sorry, my fingers are not dirty, they're stained. Take this pointed edge and slip it underneath one of the stitches until you get it right to this little rounded part. That's where the blade is, and you just push and that snaps your thread. Okay, now where I back stitch, there's a couple stitches there, so it's a little bit harder. I'm gonna push through there, go under a couple stitches, pull that thread, and I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm actually gonna go under the same stitches on that side just to make sure that I've broken that thread loose. And then you can see that thread just kind of comes out. Okay. You can also, if you made a bigger mistake and you need to go along the whole line, you can take it in between the seam. You take the sharp edge down in the crack, and the red ball point is facing up, and you would just push through until it breaks more, but I don't want to break too much, okay? Then I need to reinforce this because when I go to flip this out, all these stitches are going to start popping because I took that back stitch out. So I've got it to a bigger hole size. So I'm going to go back to my machine and just real quick, I'm going to lower my presser foot, lower my needle, and I'm going to do a quick back stitch a couple times, and then go to the edge, back stitch. So basically you're just re-sewing the part that you cut wherever you made the mistake. Okay, and now I have a little bit of a bigger opening and I've back stitched in that spot so it's not going to come undone when I'm pulling and turning inside out. Okay, so then you're going to, however you can, get your fingers in there. I put my thumb inside and just push the corners. Okay, so use that index finger that went in there and pushed. And you pull until you've got the whole thing right side out. Now, you want the corners to come out. We trim those corners so they'll get nice and sharp. So you do as much as you can with your fingers. Okay, but you can see it's still kind of wonky. So the next thing you can do is take a pen or a pencil that doesn't have the pen or pencil and it doesn't have any lead sticking out, or a chopstick or something like that that's sharp, being very careful that you do not poke through. You're going to stick it inside and just very carefully kind of work those corners out to more of a point. Just really carefully. You can run it along the edge to make sure that the edge is nice and straight and flat. From inside, poke out this corner, running it along the edge. Okay, and get this corner. Okay, now you can see you have a much flatter, nicer looking square. Okay, the next step we're going to do is, for this particular project, we are going to mark a 1-inch square in the center of our project. Okay, so you're going to use disappearing ink pen or an erasable pen, and we're going to do a 1-inch square. So I'm going to take you back over to the table for that. Okay, so if you sewed correctly at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you should now have a 3-inch by 3-inch square. So you want to take a ruler and you want to draw a square and mark a square 1 inch from each edge. So I'm marking 1 inch from this edge, 1 inch from this edge. I'm going to turn it. I'm going to mark 1 inch from that edge, 1 inch from this edge. Okay. You want to make sure that it's a nice square, and then you can trace the edges of your ruler so that you have a 1-inch square. I'm using a disappearing friction pen. You can use a chalk pen, something that disappears, okay? And this is on the right side of your fabric because we need to be able to see it. So you have a 1-inch square in the middle of your fabric. Now we're going to take this back to the sewing machine and we are just going to stitch all the way around that square, okay? Okay, so I'm back in my sewing machine and I'm going to align my needle with this corner over here, and I'm going to match my needle up. So I'm going to turn my hand wheel toward me. When my needle lands right in that corner, I'm going to lower my needle. I'm going to lower my presser foot, and then I'm going to stitch just a straight line following your drawing all the way to the other corner. Okay, I'm going to stop, needle down, lift your presser foot, pivot, presser foot down, stitch again. Okay, needle down, presser foot up, pivot, presser foot down, stitch. Okay, I'm back in that last corner, needle down, presser foot up, pivot, lower presser foot, and stitch to where you first started. You're going to close that up. Okay, back stitch. You should have back stitched when you started, back stitch when you stop. Cut your fabric however you need to. Then you'll have a little thread tail here. You could take your scissors and cut off any little threads on the top or the bottom. Cut your threads. Okay, now you have a square in the middle of your project. Now we're going to fill this. So in where you have that little hole, you're going to take your funnel and we're going to fill it with whatever weight you're using, whether it's rice or dried beans or little BBs. Let's go fill that at the table now. Okay, so now you're going to find your opening and you're going to fill it. Now this is why having like a little paper funnel made is helpful, because you can just stick that in there and then you can dump your filler in. Okay, you want to make sure it goes all the way around the whole outer edge. You want to fill in this whole outer edge, okay? So I'm going to do that off camera right now. I'm going to get it full and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so once you are satisfied with your filling and you've got it filled up, we need to close this opening now. Okay, so you want to push whatever filler you had aside, and we are going to close the opening. Now to do that, you need your project and you need your hand sewing needle and some thread threaded on there. The first thing you want to do is thread your needle, and then you want to make a knot at the end. You can do this any way you'd like, but this is the easiest way that I found. I actually just grab the end of it and I wrap it around my index finger a few times. And then I use one finger to kind of push it off, and I use my thumb and my index finger to kind of roll and push and roll that thread off my finger. Then I can use my middle finger, or whatever finger is handy, and my thumb and kind of pull back. And that creates a knot at the end of my fabric, or sorry, at the end of my thread. Okay, so now you can make a knot any way you want, but that's a quick way. Wrap it around the end of your finger, kind of roll it and push it between your thumb, rolling it off the edge of your finger, and pull the knot back. Okay, so now you have a knot. Now what you want to do, this is called a ladder stitch. You want to start in the inside of your seam, and you're going to come out towards the top. So you want to start at the edge of where your sewing line was done previously, and we want to come and out through the top. Okay, the reason we're doing it from inside out like that is because your needle then, or sorry, your knot then gets hidden inside. Okay, so now your knot is inside the seam and you're coming straight out. Now to do a ladder stitch, we're going to make like the rungs of a ladder. I came out over here and I'm going to go straight across the seam and go back down just right across where I've already come out, right on the top. I'm going to poke down and I'm going to go on that same side now, just a couple millimeters, maybe 1/4 of an inch or so, okay, on the same side of the seam. I'm coming back out, okay, so you're going to pull your thread through that way, okay, and now you can see one stitch going this way, okay. Now I'm still on, sorry, I'm trying to find my camera here. I am still on this side, so I want to cross over directly across from it and go in, directly across. And then I'm going to go on that same side again, about 1/4 of an inch over. On that same side, come out about 1/4 of an inch, pull the thread. Okay, now I have 2 stitches there. Okay, now I want to cross over again. So I'm going to cross over the seam directly from where my other line was. I'm going to go in from the top, pick up about, I don't know, a couple centimeters or 1/4 inch of fabric here on this side. Whoops. Okay, and I'm going to pull that through. And you're going to do that across your whole opening. Okay, there's 3. Again, across from the seam, straight down in, pick up about 1/4 of an inch or so of fabric, pull it. Okay, now you can see the stitches here. This is called a ladder stitch because it's kind of like the rungs of a ladder going across. But when you pull tight, you'll see those stitches mostly disappear. Okay, and your hole closes up. So you want to continue to do that until you get all the way across your hole. Okay, cross from the seam, pick up a little bit of fabric, pull, cross the seam again to the other side, pick up some more fabric, pull. I'm going to pull a little bit tighter this time to close that up. Okay, now I'm on my last one. I'm going to go across the seam again, pick up fabric like I did, and on my last one, make sure you pull tight so it's closed, but you don't want to pull so tight that it's wrinkled. You want it just to be just closed enough, okay? Then you're now going to take your needle and kind of go in the middle of your seam there and just try to kind of push down and out, just right in the middle of your seam. You don't want to pick up a ton of fabric. You just want a little bit there in the middle of your seam. Okay, and you want to pull a little bit. You want a little loop of thread here, okay? Because now, to finish this off, you're going to knot that thread. So you're going to take your needle. Try to get you. It's trying to twist on me. Okay, so this loop of thread here, you want to take your needle and you want to go through that like 2 to 3 times. I like to do it 3 times just to be sure. So this is just creating a knot. So I'm just going through the middle of the loop 3 times and then I'm going to pull it tight. Mine got kind of messy, but that's okay. And that creates your knot at the end. Now you can kind of push that down into the seam with your needle. And if it's too big of a mess, you can trim or start over, but I'm not too concerned with it. Then you're going to take your needle and you're going to push kind of right at that knot into the seam, into the center of the seam. Okay, and you're going to come out way down on the side of your project. See, I'm coming down way on the side. You're going to come down way on the side, and that seems weird, but this is what's going to hide your thread a little bit better. Okay, so you're going to come out way on the side, you're going to pull tight, and you're going to trim that thread real close to the edge of your fabric without cutting your fabric. What that does is, it's hidden now, but the thread gets locked inside of your seam, so now it won't come out. So again, I made kind of a messy knot there. Hopefully yours won't be so messy, but I could trim that off if I wanted to. But now it's closed on all the seams with a hidden stitch, and there you have a pattern weight. Now you can make as many more of these as you want. If you want to take if you used a friction pen like I did, you can take a warm iron that's not too hot and just set it on there and those lines will disappear, or you can use your pen and erase them. If you use chalk, you probably won't really see it anymore anyways. But there you have it. There's a pattern weight. And when you do your next project, you set this on your paper on top of your fabric, and this will hold your pattern down without it shifting on you while you're sewing. So I hope you enjoyed this little project. You can go make a few more. You probably need at least about 6 of them to have a complete set. But there you have it. Fun little pattern weight to hold down your fabric. Thank you so much for joining me on this new sewing journey. I'm so glad I could be a part of it and that I could teach you some basics to get you started sewing. I really hope that you found this course valuable, and if so, that you would share with your friends and other new sewers. Get the word out. I will be having more courses coming out soon, different things about bag making and garment making, but I really just wanted to get you started sewing and get you on the right track with just the very basics. So again, I hope you've enjoyed. If you want to join me over in the Facebook group, we will have a link for you and you can ask any questions there. I will answer questions and our other group members will answer questions and help you out. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time. Bye.